What's going on, guys? Welcome to the final episode of 2021.
Age of the roof impacts how much you pay in taxes. Zillow doesn't have anything to say about that.
My pick for the biggest winner, the neighborhood of Dumbo. They're beautiful from the outside, but then you get these funky floor plans that oftentimes don't make a lot of sense on the inside.
Zoom interviews for co-ops, we can all agree, is archaic. The board meeting the buyers, sitting down, asking for the bulldogs from Wyoming to be flown in for the interview as well because they want to meet everybody, pets included.
Those companies, those businesses that are saying remote is here, virtual is here, let's lean into it, let's try and perfect it, they're the ones who you're seeing kind of taking advantage of the field.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the final episode of 2021, episode 59. We're going to do a end of the year wrap-up pod. I have a few guests on just to discuss all things real estate and business that happened in 2021. Our first guest today is Courtney Ronin, my friend Courtney Ronin. Introduce yourself, what you do, and who you are over at TitleVest.
Sure. Good morning. Good morning. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Courtney Ronin, a proud longtime friend of Takk Yamaguchi, fellow Lehigh University alumni, and of course, real estate aficionado, or I try to be. I'm a senior vice president of business development. I work in sales at TitleVest. And here I am covering the front desk today because our reception team is out sick. So I wear many hats here. Yeah, wear many hats here. In addition to sales, I also co-manage the sales team. We have about 21 people who specialize in residential and commercial title insurance. What is title insurance? Super quickly. Takk, I will demand my own episode in 2022, but long story short, title insurance is a form of indemnity insurance that protects lenders and homeowners from any sort of financial loss sustained from a defect in a title to a property. Typically in New York City, let's say, or really anywhere, you're getting title insurance on both a refinance and also on a purchase. This is typically paid for in New York by the buyer, and it is a cost that is paid at the closing table. And the most common claims or defect in the title would be back taxes, liens, conflicting wills with various heirs, etc. It is a one-time fee paid upfront, different from homeowners insurance, but we'll get to that at another time. But as for me, I am here to help my friend, Mr. Yamaguchi, with his end of year wrap up. So
yeah, tell the audience, where do you live and where have you lived around New York City?
Where have I not lived? I currently live in Brooklyn on the border of Cobble Hill and Carroll Gardens on President Street. Prior to that, I was in a, let's call it a street easy micro neighborhood called Columbia Waterfront District, which is essentially the Battery Tunnel. That was my first foray into Brooklyn. I've been there about 4.5 years. Before that, I spent many years on the Lower East Side, Delancey and Ridge Street. And before that, a brief stint in the Upper East. And before that, the one and only Murray Hill.
Murray Hill, our favorite.
Former stomping grounds of all of us here, probably.
I remember that Ridge Street apartment was actually really fun. You had that really cool, it's 208 Delancey now. There's the new development. So the backyard from that old apartment, you're not going to have any views, but you did have that balcony that overlooked a slice of that Williamsburg Bridge, right, looking east. Yeah, so that was a really nice apartment.
It was a good party apartment.
Favorite Murray Hill establishment?
Do I have to say the Wharf? R.I.P.
R.I.P. the Wharf. Yeah, I mean it's a classic bar. It was a classic bar. All right, so let's get right into it. So the first category is the biggest winner in real estate in 2021. Now I'll go first just to kind of warm it up, and we'll kind of rattle these off. Talk about 1 to 2 minutes per question. So my biggest winner in real estate is the Brooklyn luxury market. The Brooklyn luxury market condos consist mostly of condominiums and townhomes. 42 contracts for properties asking $4 million or more were signed this quarter, which smashes the previous Christmas week record at the 17. The record was back in 2016. As you know, last year was pretty much almost nil. So, it's hard to compare last year with the COVID surge. But, to top that off, the total sales volume for the week came in at $360 million. So I'm sorry. So I said quarter, but it was actually this month in December. So $360 million signed just in the month of December. But that's just a figure that is, I think, a combination of, the wealth coming back into New York City, confidence coming back into New York City, and obviously the jobs and the money and the flight to quality in the capital. There's still a lot of confidence in that in Manhattan. So Courtney, go ahead.
That's actually even more of a specific winner point than I was going to make. I was going to say the New York City and, of course, really everywhere, residential real estate markets, confidence that people have had in these markets since, of course, we were allowed to show properties again, maybe June of 2020, is astonishing. You can, these days you cannot even find something to buy without going over the ask, and Lord knows what other concessions that you're going to be making. It's been incredible. Such a humongous difference even from a few months prior to that. And the last year and a half or so have blown expectations out of the water. Even commercial has really come back up, but nothing to the degree of the residential real estate market. And in Brooklyn, especially being in Brooklyn during COVID, nobody missed a beat. Yes, the shopping and the experiences were different, but real estate wise, it was excellent. I would say I was the biggest winner in real estate during COVID because I managed to get a new apartment with outdoor space below market. But 100%. That was in the summer of 2020, and those 100%. Days are no longer here.
That ship has sailed. Yeah, we're looking at some of the apartments in Brooklyn. If you were, let's just say, a renter, you got 35 to 40 to 50% increases in rent throughout Brooklyn. So yeah, it's even on the rental front, it's been kind of crazy. So the winners for the landlords, obviously, not so much for the tenants. And then as far as not so much for the tenants, this leads into our next category, would be the biggest loser in real estate in 2021. You mentioned the office market. I'll go. I actually want to speak more on that. The Manhattan office market, actually, my client, he's a professor at CUNY City College, New York. And his graduate students are actually partially responsible for developing these reports on the office markets in New York City. And the most recent report came out of the CNBC article published last month in November. About 28% of New York office workers are back in the office. So we're still looking at about a 70% vacancy rate in New York City. And yeah, are they back once a week, twice a week? Yes, of course. But overall, the 70% figure is quite large. The article didn't state, I'm going to quote directly from CNBC here. Employers expect that 49% of office workers will return on an average weekday by January. And then, on cut to that, with Omicron not being as robust as it is today, and we're recording this late December, no one knew how quickly Omicron was going to spread back in November. So, that survey of 188 big employers in Manhattan, updated to what it is today, I would say maybe push that figure back, not into January, but more, perhaps probably into like the springtime, when seasonal trends generally with COVID indicate a downtick of infections in the spring and summer months. So that's that. According to the revenue report, only about 25 to 30% of the normal numbers of workers are coming into the office still. Let's just say if you break that into numbers, 60,000 people on the streets for lunches, haircuts, shopping, shoe shines, hot dog stands, et cetera, et cetera. Compare that to 180,000 office workers that are usually in the area prior to the pandemic lockdown. So that would be the biggest loser in real estate, in my opinion, is this year is still just the general office markets in New York City.
It's been, we're seeing similar. I mean, actually something that I was going to say a bit later about the, biggest surprise in real estate is Class B office space particularly is making a decent comeback, which is nice to see. Yes, some of it has been repurposed, but some of it is business as usual. I mean, I'm here today. I've been back 3 to 4 days a week since August of 2020. And half of our office has been in since March of 2020 because we process regular paper closing packages. I'll get into a paper closing package later, but yeah, it's, especially in this area, we're on 42nd Street between Park and Lex. Yes, it was quiet for a time, but most people are, well, before Omicron, most people were back.
So who's the loser?
The biggest loser, obviously, Zillow's iBuying program.
There you go. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
Which
Talk about that.
Which I think was a good, listen, it was a good win for some, but it was not a good win for Zillow. Obviously, they pulled out, they faced steep losses, etc. And I think it goes to show, I mean, I'll loosely quote Leonard Steinberg, but you need an agent.
Yep.
You need an agent to do so many of these necessary improvements and holding your hand throughout the process. So personally, that's what I felt would be the biggest loser. I could go the easy way out and say retail, but retail, as most people would remember, if you thought about it for a second, was suffering even before COVID. So
yeah, the rise of Amazon. All right, good. Biggest real estate surprise of 2021. So I thought about this. There's so many surprises, and the biggest thing that sticks out to me is you've met my friend Levi Maya from Florida.
yes,
He's actually one of the Compass founders of our Miami office. But the strength of the Miami, South Florida, the real estate market there, and then the strength of Aspen and Vail, Colorado real estate, and also Denver, Colorado. I think just the start of the pandemic, people just started looking at other options, not within the city. But it's not even just that. Yeah, of course you want a bigger home. Everybody wants a bigger home. But what makes Miami and Aspen and Vail so attractive as far as, living, the appreciation? I think a couple things. DeSantis kept school and businesses open throughout the pandemic. Income tax is zero. It's amazing how fast Miami has become a tech hub. There's a race between New York City and Miami right now for who will become the first crypto-centric city in America. And yeah, I mean, as much as I love Eric Adams, I don't know if he has the people around him to make that goal actually achievable based on the flight to tech capital that has already gone down in the last 12 months of Florida. So, that's my biggest surprise. The strength of the Miami market. My buddy successfully bought his house and then 9 months later flipped it for, almost $1 million profit so that you could get into a larger house. I mean,
wow.
These things just normally don't happen in the normal market. So that's my surprise there. I did touch on Colorado a little bit, but same thing, almost $1 billion in sales in Vail in the third quarter of this year. If you think about Vail as a town, and I'm sure you've been there, but if you drive by, it's literally a little stop on a highway.
Yeah.
And there is a little community there, yes, but it's not, $1 billion in a small town it's so impressive. And then you go to Aspen and the entry-level single-family home is $7 million. Like, where is this money coming from? It's just astonishing what the pandemic has done into these secondary markets. And I'm very, very happy for our friends and dear colleagues that are having a career year brokering homes out there. Well, so, okay, back to you, Ronan. What is your biggest surprise?
Now, I will absolutely echo that. Anything in a secondary market, anything in the second home market, what surprised me the most, this was happening a bit, but the extent to which it happened during COVID was, let's just say, people skipping the traditional first-time home buying of a condo or a co-op, because as you know, once the market came roaring back here, so then did the prices. And some people, depending on their work and the requirements that they were facing, skipped it entirely. And now they're buying their first home in Cold Spring. They're buying their first home up in Garrison. They're buying their first home even further up in the Catskills. People, I know people who went up as far as the Adirondacks. They were buying out in East Hampton, something out in the Springs that they can get for under $1 million. And they come in to the city when they need to come into the city. And this is people from all different industries and careers. And it was very, very, very surprising to me that the faith-based leap that people made going straight to what you would refer to as a secondary market and sort of sometimes skipping New York entirely. I will say now I'm seeing some people who did skip to the secondary market are, either renting in New York and it's affordable to do. If they can make it work, that's great. And some people are flipping, to your point, their secondary homes, and now they have enough money to generate for the down payment on a condo here.
Right.
So it's been absolutely surprising to me the amount of flexibility that people were willing to engage in to make home ownership work.
Switching gears, biggest business surprise. One, I don't know if you heard of OpenSea before, but it's the rise of NFTs, rise of cryptocurrency, the rise of Bitcoin prices. A lot of people are going into it. And I also just kind of want to be in the part of this early phase of, the blockchain. And we've actually had Gary Vee on as one of our panelists at the Compass Retreat in Austin last month.
I saw that. It's incredible.
And yeah, it was incredible. But, he talks about, the blockchain is here to stay. Title will eventually be on the blockchain. So this is something that you probably want to, research and look into eventually. But, the rise of the OpenSea is a platform that enables artists to put their art and tie it onto the blockchain and then sell it in the open market. And I bought a couple NFTs just for fun, just to be part of the experience. And I think this is an interesting market to continue to look into, will be blockchain and NFTs.
I definitely, to your point about blockchain, our parent company, First American, who's one of the largest underwriters in the country, they were already executing a lot of transactions and data on blockchain. We're one of the bigger data holding companies in the real estate and underwriting space. So we've actually been using blockchain for quite a while. And yes, absolutely, in non-New York City markets, having title on the blockchain is actually very feasible and very helpful. And, originally you would think, that's going to put something like a title company out of a job. But really, it's going to make data collection a lot easier. It might be putting search vendors or people to that degree sort of on the edge. However, from a title company's perspective, any way that we can collect data that makes it much easier, we're very open to, because it makes the closing process much more smoothly for someone like you and your clients and our attorneys. I would say definitely the biggest surprise or the trend in real estate that I thought the pandemic might assist with is the 5-hour in-person closing has not gone away. Much to the dismay, at least in New York City. Much to the dismay of our attorney friends.
Yeah,
for sure. But it's
5 hours. 5 hours is brutal, and it's not
5
even
hours is brutal.
Title, right? We're talking about, will the funding clear? Re-review the loan before the loan clears. It's the managing agents and their scheduling and their availability. I mean, there's so many different wheels. It's definitely an area that definitely can be, I think, improved on in the future. Now, on to the next. Best new tech in real estate. I personally, speaking of Gary Vee, want to revisit what he was saying. And he's, content creating is going to be paramount for any small business owner, not just in real estate. So I don't want to say it's a rise, but or I'm sorry, a best new tech, but TikTok videos are definitely something that is going to be on the rise for professionals that are currently, let's just say they're not in their teens, but in their 30s, 40s, 50s, that they're probably going to have to adapt to, because in 5 years, I think that's where more eyeballs are going to be over Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
Yes, I would piggyback off of that. And I was going to say anything that gets a potential buyer a clearer picture of the property without necessarily just being able to be there. Mm-hmm. So I forget the name of the floor plan company that had a huge surge in usage at the beginning of the pandemic. You can make the 3D models of the floor plan of the home. Zoom, Microsoft Teams, any sort of video, interface that people are able to see things without being there. I mean, we've done, I can't tell you the amount of transactions that we've done of a significantly high dollar value where someone bought it sight unseen.
Best new trend in real estate. Tie that together, development of videos on Instagram and TikTok. Content creators are now real estate brokers and vice versa, right? Real estate brokers are now content creators. In the past, it was the older gatekeepers that will probably hoard their Rolodex on their paper index cards and keep their contacts close to their chest, those older gatekeeper brokers will probably fade away in the next 10 to 20 years. I think it's a brand new world for content creators. They have the ability to capitalize and monetize on the content that they own, that they've created within their sphere, within their circle. And that's kind of the direction that I think the business is going to go.
Right. I couldn't agree more. It's actually something, my mother is a broker. She's of the baby boomer generation. And, we speak often about how you have to keep up with the trends or you're out. And I think where you and I especially are in kind of that middle to old millennial space is we are the next generation.
Wait, I'm still in my mid-30s. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, that's right. You didn't just have a birthday.
You're
still at the wharf. You're still ripping picklebacks at the wharf in 2007.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, you have to keep up. There really is no excuse anymore for sticking your head in the sand and, stomping your feet that, people, I'm going to rely on my reputation. I'm going to rely on this. I mean, it should go without saying your reputation is everything, and you're already in this business and you're not going to be successful without a stellar reputation, but you need to have everything else really to a T that showcases you and your listings.
That's right. And then last and not least, worst trend in real estate. Mine, I'm going to go back to what you said earlier, is I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on Zillow. So the consumer, Zillow is a consumer facing site. Brokers don't use it, but what the consumer likes about Zillow, in my opinion, is the Zestimate tool. For the Zestimate tool to show, let's just say your home online being 10% below what you think it should be, that's going to turn off. That's going to turn off a lot of the users and the users of the website. Zillow, I think, did with the Zestimate was accuracy was never a goal. If you use that to really buy a home, it creates a risk on the buyer side. If Zillow uses their own algorithm on the Zestimate to buy a home, it creates a risk on Zillow. Zestimate itself, I think, is real estate clickbait. Their algorithms were never designed to accurately, really truthfully value a home. I don't think their algorithms can sustain that, the type of accuracy. I don't think any machine can sustain that with that type of accuracy, because you cannot put a value on the amount of cars that drive the block, the noisy neighbor next door, the lien type of backsplash that the kitchen had used. I mean, there's just so many factors in valuing a home. The algorithm is not sophisticated enough to actually assess the value of a house. And when the users use it as an estimate to either sell a home or put an offer on a home, it really creates risk on their end. So I think that's one of the worst trends in real estate.
It absolutely is. And it affects, I think, every part of the process, even the financing.
Right.
I was going to, in addition to Zillow and the Zestimate and just the reliance on a non-human, intangible sort of expertise. I mean, it hurts on the bank end too. I mean, and let's say another worst trend is now all of the paperwork that's required to get a loan and to bring to a closing. That's unfortunately always going to be a problem moving forward. Time kills deals,
TKD.
And so do unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely.
And, I see things on Zillow, and what you're not going to know, and this actually, Levy might speak to this a bit. My future in-laws just bought a place in Florida, and what they didn't factor into was the age of the roof impacts how much you pay in taxes, which I did not know, and they did
I did not know that.
And guess what? Zillow doesn't have anything to say about that.
Right. Zillow doesn't know that the roof cost is going to be $100,000 and it needs to be replaced next year.
Yep. And that's impacting your assessment.
Going into valuation on a web platform is very risky business.
It's tough, the amount of onus of responsibility that's been on real estate agents throughout all of this. What is demanded of a real estate agent, both on the listing and the buy side, is so astronomical, and everyone I know has risen to the challenge and then some, and maybe it's good. A lot of it I thought could be sort of the worst possible scenario, and really adding to your, now you have to keep track of COVID forms and things like that. And now you can, refuse to show someone something if they're unvaccinated. I think that's coming down the pike, but aside from that, maybe it's the worst trends or sometimes the good trend, because it's going to take people who just aren't qualified out of the business. I
Can't
think
save them all.
COVID 100% made a real estate agent a real estate advisor. You are someone's real estate agent. You're their therapist. You're their driver. You're their, friend. You're their foe. I mean, it's a lot for people to deal with. And you especially you were already all of that and more for people. So maybe COVID, in a sense, was almost a blessing, because now it's really tapped into your talents and the other agents and brokers such as you.
Last year was a very, very tough year for New York City real estate brokers. But yeah, this year definitely, for those that made it through last year, not even myself, but our friends and colleagues included, definitely was able to step up to the occasion and really capitalize on this market. So, Courtney, where can people find you? You got an Instagram handle you want to plug, or?
Yes, I do. People can find me at Ronan the Barbarian, and that's Bear, BEAR. I'll send that to you in the chat.
And you can find I'll put that in the show notes. Yeah.
You can find me, Courtney, at TitleVest.com, and call me, email me, DM me anytime.
Sounds good. Courtney, thank you so much for your time.
Always keep closing.
Justin Rubinstein, my friend, fellow Compass agent from New York City. Justin, I'll give you a minute to introduce yourself, but Justin and I are in the same office. We broker properties in Manhattan and Brooklyn. Just had a pretty fun year. I mean, you had a really nice house in the Hamptons this year that I got to visit. Did an awesome bike ride from the town of East Hampton all the way down to Old Montauk Highway to Best Pizza, then down to Old Montauk Highway to Gurney's and back. I mean, what a journey it was.
Great to see you, Takk. Thanks again for having me. Always delighted to spend time with you. So,
Yes,
Justin Rubinstein, I've been at Compass for several years, been in the industry for 17 years, focus on residential, luxury, new developments and condos and co-op sales in Manhattan and Brooklyn, as well as investments, always working with investors, doing 1031s, buying and selling some buildings. Sold a big portfolio this year in Brooklyn Heights, and I'm always happy to help out investors. That was a really fun trip, Takk, and I think that it's possible that was the finale trip in the Scout that we took with the bikes in the back. Yeah, because that was towards the end. Yeah, that's right. That was right before the transmission went. Transmission is back up and running, but I've got a 5-week-old baby and I've had the truck for 9 years, and I think it might be time to hand it off and let someone else enjoy the Scout for some time.
The spring market is probably a good time to sell something like that, right? You got want that convertible life. You got those rich New Yorkers that want to experience the Hampton life and drive a car like that around. It's like it's a good opportunity.
It turns 50 next week, so right. I think the stars are aligning, and it might be time to let somebody else enjoy it. So if you know anyone that wants one, yeah.
All right, I'll keep my eyes peeled. And if any listeners want a car like this, maybe I'll plug the photo of it in my show notes.
There you go.
A secondary car market on my podcast notes.
Right.
You and I are fellow Virginians, right? Where are you from?
Absolutely, Richmond, Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Went to the University of Virginia and have lots of friends from Northern Virginia, where you're from. Mm-hmm. But yeah, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and been in New York. Actually, next week will be 20 years for me.
20 years. Yeah, what a time. You could follow Justin on Instagram. I'm going to plug his IG handle as well. We're almost at the end of 2021, so I wanted to get together to talk a couple topics. The biggest winner in real estate in 2021.
My pick for the biggest winner, and it is hard to choose from because there have been lots of winners this year because it's been such a wild ride.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
But my pick for the biggest winner in real estate in 2021 is the neighborhood of Dumbo.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Elaborate.
So Dumbo has been doing really well for a while. They've always kind of competed with Williamsburg. They opened up the connection to Brooklyn Bridge Park, I guess, a year or two ago. And they've had some nice buildings that have come up in the last few years. You've always had 100J there. The Jehovah's Witnesses finally sold. Yeah, they finally sold that enormous lot they've been sitting on. And now you have 85J, which is a Morris Adjemi CIM building, and it's a beautiful building. So a client of mine was lucky enough to secure a penthouse there. It's
Mm.
2 buildings, multiple roof decks. They've got a 30-foot setback on the sidewalk to create a little pedestrian plaza
Mhm.
there. And then just around the corner, you've got Olympia House going up, and they are transacting close to $2,000 a foot. So if you said a couple of years ago that you'd see transactions nearing 2,000 a foot, now it's to be determined what the total blended average will be on the sell out of that building. But if you told me a few years ago that you'd be seeing prices nearing 2,000 a foot in Dumbo, I would have said, well, that would make, that would be a great time to invest in the neighborhood of Dumbo. And people that have invested there have done really well. And I think people that are buying there now are going to have a great place to live. And that neighborhood has exceeded, I think, expectations and exceeded what other neighborhoods in Brooklyn have done in the last few years. And other neighborhoods have had their turn in the spotlight in Brooklyn in the last few years. Williamsburg, obviously, Brooklyn Heights, Cobble Hill, even Bed-Stuy and Bushwick. But I think this year the big winner was Dumbo. And
Okay,
people that are
Dumbo
buying
it
there
is.
now are going to like it.
Biggest loser in real estate. I'll start first. I had Courtney Ronin on earlier, and we talked about the office markets. I think that there's several. I mean, as good as the year was, I think one of the bigger losers in real estate of 2021 is the project going on in West Chelsea, Union Square West. West Chelsea. HFC Capital Group has the 14 or XI building, which just had gone through a series of unfortunate events, even dating back to 2020. Obviously, no one foresaw COVID coming, but that project, if many of you are aware, in West Chelsea, basically right north of the meatpacking district, that area used to be a parking lot, and HFC purchased it for that lot. The vacant lot itself was purchased for, I think it was like $500 million, and it ultimately went into construction mode probably 4 or 5 years ago, but just the time it took, and then the timing of COVID probably slowed down a lot of the income coming in for lenders to be repaid. And there's $300 million of unpaid liens from contractors, the vendors. There was a word of a fake wire being sent to CIM from HFC for some $20 million. That a lot of weird, shady things. There was a mob tie. I don't know if you remember this article, but there was an executive that was alleged to mob ties. Yeah. And I just feel like this company at one point was one of the most prolific developers in New York City. Kind of crazy to see how badly this project turned out to be.
Well, I was actually going to say the same thing.
Oh, did I take your answer?
That's
okay.
I was actually going to say the same thing, because that was a big one this year. I mean, people really liked the idea of that project. You've got the Six Senses Hotel going there. You're right around the corner from the Whitney. I feel like this happens when Bjork Ingels designs a luxury residential project. They're beautiful from the outside, but then you get these funky floor plans that oftentimes don't make a lot of sense on the inside. And that's a big building. So you've got some great floor plans, but you've got a lot that just don't make sense. Yeah. And I think that was one of the other things that prohibited them from really taking off and getting a lot of velocity in their sales, was some of these wonky floor plans. But yeah, that was kind of the one that I was going to pick as well. I mean, HFC, I wouldn't, I don't envy them in 2021. They really had a rough time. Of course, COVID didn't help, and no one could have predicted that. But that was just problematic from the beginning. Sky high prices, asking prices, and that's unfortunate. But I do think it'll reemerge with Witkoff, and I think there could be some good opportunity there for buyers that are looking to come in and be in that location in a luxury building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And the fact that you and I picked the same answer, this is it's a telling story that one of the biggest developers in New York City experiencing one of the biggest downfalls. Something like this happened in 2008 too. Who was it? It was one Madison developer.
Yes, of course.
Had a default, and
and 10 years later, you had a nice building. But yeah, that was stalled for several years. I guess I could throw another one out there, which I think this was 2021, but maybe it was even 2020. Multifamily landlords. If you owned rent stabilized apartments, you've owned them, and if you've operated them properly and played by the rules, all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from under you, and you've got rent stabilized apartments that have basically lost all their value. There was nothing you could have done about it, and no way you could have predicted that. And now you've lost, depending on how many buildings you own, tens of millions of dollars in value just by playing by the rules.
Right.
So
and I think as a result, As a result, we'll probably see a lot more defunct older buildings, unfortunately, that has landlords that have no incentive to recapitalize these buildings. So they're just going
That's right.
they're going to be rundown buildings in New York City as a result. All right.
It's true.
I'm going to let you go first again. Your best new trend in real estate in 2021.
So this is what I'll tell you. What I've noticed over the last, you started to see this about 10 years ago after the financial crisis, and you've seen it more and more over the last 5 years, and especially the last 2 to 3 years. You're seeing smart, young, enterprising college graduates move to New York with the intention of becoming a luxury real estate broker in New York City. And that was not something that you used to see definitely a generation ago, and really not 10 years ago. People kind of came here and maybe they found their way into it, or they fell into it. They were in another industry, but it was pretty rare that you met someone that, as a college senior, was thinking this is what they wanted to do for their career. And now you're starting to see well-educated, smart, enterprising young people that decide this is where I want to make my living and this is what I want to have as a career. And they come out of school, they get the real estate license, and they want to become a broker right away. And that's good for everybody. It's definitely good for buyers and sellers because it adds competition to the marketplace. And it's definitely good for companies like Compass, and it's good for people like you and me because we meet great people. We get to be surrounded by better people, and it helps to level the playing field in the long term for buyers and sellers because you've got people that come here that have integrity and that really want to make a great living in real estate and have the wherewithal to do it and have the appetite for it and are great people to work with. So we're seeing more and more of that, those people coming out of college. And I think that's a good trend.
Yep, no, I absolutely agree. I went to an open house hosted by Ryan Serhant's team and McPeak, and the young brokers that join. I mean, yeah, they're basically TikTokers straight out of college wearing nice fancy suits.
Right, and some of that, some of them,
ago.
right, yeah, and some of them still will kind of come in and realize it's not cut out for them. But you are seeing people that are coming in and realizing like this is what I want to do, and they're sticking with it and making a great career out of it.
Yep, no, I agree. Good observation. And then last but not least, worst trend in real estate.
Well, you kind of hit on it a moment ago. So now I got to take the other side of the coin, which is selling apartments on TikTok. I mean, or renting apartments on TikTok. Okay, we get it that it's a great way to get your face out there and it's a great way to market yourself. But conveying to people that this is a smart decision is, again, just a bad idea for everybody. It's one way of advertising, but then you have brokers that say, oh, I sold this apartment over TikTok. I did this transaction. Putting it out there and getting clicks and getting likes is one thing, but to say you're selling apartments over TikTok and then having people actually believe that, it's just unrealistic. So people coming out into the industry and saying like, oh, I sold this, sold that, I did this on TikTok. It's one thing to like watch it and it's for fun. It's really for entertainment. But you still have to get out. You've got to go see the apartment in person. You've got to see what the hallways are like. You got to see what the lobby is like.
That's right.
And that might sound old school, but it's a home. It's not just an investment. It's your primary residence. And I think it's important to see and feel it. So it's great to be able to, watch for fun videos on TikTok. But some of them are just ridiculous too. And some of the people that post them, are kind of laughable. Good. So that trend, I don't think it's going anywhere, unfortunately. But sure. I'll count that one as my worst trend.
Okay, got it. The rise of TikTok influencers claiming that their fame is purely from their TikTok. And we won't mention any names, but yes, there are definitely brokers out there. Justin, I wanted to wish you and your family a happy new year. I appreciate your time. Go ahead. Where can people reach out to you? What's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, of course. It's my website's justinrubinstein.com. So
not your TikTok.
Find me there.
JustinRubinstein.com. Okay. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, JustinRubinstein.com.
Do you have an Instagram that you want to plug to?
Sure. Yeah. It's just my name, Justin Rubinstein. And it's RUBINSTEIN. that one tricks people up.
All right, I am here with my friend Natalie Hedden. Natalie, thank you for joining. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks.
Where are you from? And introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so like Takk mentioned, grew up in Toronto in Canada. Went to college in Montreal, Quebec for undergrad, came down to New York for grad school, and been here ever since. Joined Compass early on, or Urban Compass. Met Takk when we were a pretty small crew of maybe 60 total people at the company. And yeah, just been working. I, don't necessarily specialize in one specific neighborhood. I more do all of Manhattan, 110th Street down, and Brooklyn.
Where can people find you, Natalie?
Socially on Instagram is probably the best platform. Nat Hedden on Instagram, and yeah, feel free follow.
Give her a follow. I'm gonna put your Instagram in the notes as well. So were you number 60 at Compass?
60 something, yeah.
60 something. Okay,
62,
so
63.
The Real Deal just published the top agent headcounts of brokerages in Manhattan, just
Saw
not
that.
Brooklyn. Yeah, I saw that. So now we have 2347 licenses. So, for you're number 60 out of 2347. That's fairly early.
Yeah, we were all on top of each other in a pretty small office back then.
I know. Yeah, remember the line to the bathroom was like 100 feet long after lunch. It was pandemonium. Anyways, all right. So let's jump right into it. Let's go. I'll go first. So the first line of discussion is the biggest winner in real estate in 2021. I said a lot of things earlier with my previous guests. My next winner, Mornedo Realty in 220 Central Park South. On their third quarter's earnings call, Mornedo announced that they had closed sales in 104 of the building's 118 units as of the end of September. There was one more closing I know of in October, so they've actually closed 105 units. I don't know about December. But they garnered net proceeds of $2.97 billion. Steve Roth is actually a pretty bold guy. I like him. He's actually pretty vocal in his dealings and his earnings. But he was quoted in his earnings call that the building was sort of, quote unquote, sort of like winning the Kentucky Derby by 10 lengths. So great job for him. There are several condominium projects that you and I know along Billionaires Road that are still on the market after 3 or 4 years. Some of them in litigation, some of them have infighting within the board. Some of them have sponsor units still not selling. It's been kind of a quote unquote shit show, I guess, out there. So interesting project. So completely sold all off market, virtually no marketing program, and they're almost fully sold out. Every single one of their sales this year have hit the top 10 list in record-breaking sales. I think it was 5 or 6 of the top 10 record-breaking sales in Manhattan were done in that building. So, okay, so to you, Natalie, what do you think? What is your biggest winner in real estate in 2021?
So I went a little bigger picture than you
Right.
with that answer. And for me, it's townhouse owners and anyone with private outdoor space. I think we saw this in 2020 as well. 2020 through to 2021, some of the biggest winners were people that had townhouses. I think a lot of people who realized they were going to stick around New York City, live in this kind of densely populated metropolis, wanted a little bit lower density living space. So, we saw a lot of people, they wanted backyards, they had kids, wanted to work remotely, needed multiple rooms, and, not sharing an elevator with 300 other residents was attractive to a lot of people.
Huge, 100%. I mean, COVID pushed everybody out. What you said is actually interesting. Speaking of outdoors, we're not even talking about patios. Like, why is Aspen, Colorado and Vail exploding? The entry-level home sale in Aspen, $7 million. I mean, it's outdoor space, right?
Yeah, I mean, those were some of the bigger, if we're going to look at the country as a whole, those were some of the biggest winners. I think cities that all of a sudden, people had part-time homes in or second homes in, all of a sudden we're making them full-time, primary residences.
Huge. Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, outdoor space, definitely. Okay, good. Let's see. Biggest loser in real estate. So as we know, let's just say Manhattan office markets are bad. HFC Capital Group was what Justin Rubinstein and I Actually, we both talked about that. That was on our list. My biggest loser, my third biggest loser in real estate, I think is, I don't know, maybe we have the same answer, but it's the Zillow iBuying program. Zillow had a program where they bought a bunch of single family homes and their hopes were to flip them after improving them. I actually, a client of mine, a friend of mine in Denver, shout out Jessica Northoff for closing, my buddy Mark, he bought one of those homes. And I actually looked at it, I toured it. I mean, the finish is not that bad. Their business model, I think, works in an up market, in my opinion. Rich Barton, the CEO, who's done tremendously well over the last few decades, I think this time kind of underestimated that, yeah, Zillow has the technology and the algorithm and the data, but I think he really underestimated the niche of, the complexities of why real estate brokers exist in our market. Zillow shares dropped about 30%, market cap dropped about 9 from, I think, they dropped to about $9 billion from the peak. So, they're cutting 25% of their staff this year. They just really underestimated the importance of why brokers exist and dealing with the niche of maybe a noisy neighbor, maybe a leaky roof, maybe the future zoning law changes there, maybe the traffic affecting that corner versus the other corner. I mean, there's just so many intricacies. So in short, they wanted to be market makers. They thought that they could make the market with their iBuying program, but they forgot that, they don't set the market. We don't set the market. The property is worth what the public is willing to pay for. And they were unfortunately wrong on that side of the stick.
So I stayed in the same vein as my other answer. And for biggest losers, and I'm not picking on anyone here, I think for 2021, some of my harder deals were studio sales. Studio owners, look, I mean, they make a lot of sense when you're a single person and you're in your office and then you're at Barry's boot camp and then you're out at a restaurant. But when that's not your lifestyle anymore and you're quarantining and you can reach your fridge from your bed and your desk from your fridge and, or you're a couple and you're living in a small space, it's really tough. So studios, I think they were harder to sell than they have been historically, harder to rent than they have been historically. There's still a market for them. And I think some of the biggest winners on the flip side were people picking up studios on the cheap. People who moved out to Connecticut or Long Island and bought a house there, but still plan to work in Manhattan a couple days a week, picked up studios and got some pretty good deals this year.
Biggest real estate surprise in 2021. Let's just say that, I mentioned this earlier, 220 Central Park South. I mean, they, in the midst of a pandemic, they sold unit 61 and 60 was 157. I mean, $157 million. It's the biggest sales transaction in history of New York. Second priciest home that closed was also in the same building, $66 million. And then the luxury market, to just add to that, there was a co-op sale. I recall, I'm a big football fan and I don't like the Jets, but Woody Johnson previously had, or I think still currently holds, the biggest co-op sale at $77.5 million. But that was like 2016 or 2017. Third biggest sale in New York City was a co-op, and that was 2 East 88th Street, closing at the penthouse there, closing at $60 million. So, co-ops are obviously the biggest housing stock in New York City, but you don't really see them hit the news lines because they're not flashy. They're not the shiny new bells and whistles type building. They're kind of like the old guard of New York City. So to see a co-op hit the map is somewhat of a surprise to me.
Real estate surprise for me, I think, was actually how quickly New York rebounded and how quickly not only residents, but also tourists came back.
Yeah.
Residents came back, I think, before we even really had hardcore back in office mandates. People realized they were coming, they would be back, but even if they weren't going to be back, I think people decided they wanted to live in New York, and real estate was a good time to come back. But we rebounded a lot faster than I expected. I expected obviously New York to do well. It always does, and a gradual increase in people coming back. But they really all of a sudden came back. And here I am, like, this is 31st floor. I'm looking at condos all around me. It was dark. These lights were dark at night and they're all lit up. You notice a difference. You see 30% of a building behind you is occupied and all of a sudden it's back to 80 or 90.
Yeah, when you can't get a reservation on Resi, Open Table for some of the restaurants, standard restaurants, so there's something is up. Yeah, I mean, we're finally back, and
Resi's actually kind of a business winner if we're talking about New York. No one booked a reservation for anything until COVID.
Yeah,
we would just walk in.
That's right. Yeah. So that's a huge winner. Biggest business surprise. My main theme is cryptocurrency, Bitcoin this year. It seems to have exploded. Everybody's talking about it. A lot of people that I have seen on their financial statements, under their assets or other assets, cash equivalent assets, they have either a Coinbase or they have a Robinhood app, some sort of cryptocurrency listed in it. I have buyers that are asking their banks to count their Bitcoin as liquidity, which unfortunately is still not there yet. But that's kind of the rise. A mutual friend that we have that I shall remain nameless recently showed me his Cash App. The story was he took out a client to dinner twice back in like 2015 and like 2016. And every time he paid for dinner, our friend paid for dinner, the client would force him to open up the Cash App so that he could pay in crypto. Fast forward to last month, he showed me the crypto wallet, and it was like somewhere towards the north of like $35,000 off 2 dinners. So, the trend in cryptocurrency, I think, is here to stay. Good for the people that are early in. And I think this is something that, us being in our field, if we're doing financial statements or working with banks, and our clients are heavily loaded in that field, something to really take into consideration.
Yeah, so you have the same answer as me, essentially. I had NFTs.
Okay.
I think, look, NFTs have been around for a while. They've been all of a sudden widely accepted in 2021. We saw some huge sales, digital artists, graphic designers, people, all of a sudden, people had been selling art for like maybe $100, didn't really care about creating prints. He's just a graphic designer and sold something for $69 million this year.
Yeah, that's right.
It's kind of interesting to see that all of a sudden there's now a market for this. People are interested in it, people believe in it, and people are parking a lot of money in it.
Do you have any NFTs?
I do not yet.
Okay. Best new trend in real estate. I'll go ahead. You can start first. What is the best new trend in real estate?
So I went super New York specific on this. For me, it is Zoom interviews for co-ops. I think this is a process that, we can all agree is archaic. The board meeting the buyers, sitting down, asking for the bulldogs from Wyoming to be flown in for the interview as well, because they want to meet everybody, pets included. This process is old school. And COVID kind of forced it to at least move online. And I think it's a lot easier for buyers. I work with a lot of international buyers, and having to tell international buyers, be ready to fly to New York at a moment's notice for this board interview. You will not get a second chance. You will not get a second time slot. Be ready. Was really tough. And it was especially tough back when everyone was traveling for work all the time. We had to plan around people's work travel. Zoom interviews have made our lives a lot easier, I'd say. And so
do you think we'll ever go back to normal face-to-face interviews?
I hope not. I don't even think board members want that. So
same. I know. It's like, why? Once you've experienced, a good taste, you kind of want to keep that going and not go back to the old taste.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's tough. We really did have clients asked to fly 2 English bulldogs from Wyoming in the middle of summer for a board interview.
Jeez. Best new tech in real estate in 2021. Do you have a new tech tool or a tech item that you've used in 2021 that you find? I mean, we just talked about Zoom, but
yeah, so it's not necessarily new tech, but for us, I would say virtual tours in non-luxury real estate is new. We've done virtual tours for luxury for a while, but for your average 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studio, you weren't doing virtual tours for those properties pre-COVID. And I think during COVID, we really realized, looked like it's safer for people to view properties from home. It's more efficient for everyone if they can view properties from home. And if you see a virtual tour and you love it, great. Come, let's book an appointment. Let's go tour it together. But, first looks can be virtual, I do believe. And we saw a lot less of that in New York, I think, with the exception of the luxury market. You know,
Yeah.
we're not California. We're not doing drone videography in downtown New York.
Mm-mm.
So this is all
Yeah.
new for us.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think in this day and age, buyers should watch the video first. I would almost require them to watch it first, just because A, well, you want to stop the spread. You know, with Omicron going around, why risk it? B, it's also a waste of your time if they saw the video like, oh, I didn't realize it was X, Y, and Z in the video. In the photos, I thought it was, A or B or C. So yeah, you hit a good point there. The rise in videography and video tours and virtual tours is definitely a positive trend for our industry, especially in New York City. What do you think is the worst trend in real estate?
Worst depends on which side of the table you're sitting on. But one new trend that is kind of a funny one that I saw happen a lot in COVID was deal sweeteners. They've been around for a while, but I've never seen them used so much as in bidding wars during COVID. And so they're great if you're on the receiving end of the sweetener, but they're tough if you're trying to bid everyone out and you don't have one. So things we saw during COVID, townhouse buyers in Brooklyn bidding on properties ended up finding out they lost because the next best buyer offered a Jackson Hole house for the entire winter to the sellers. If they accepted their offer, they would get to use their Jackson Hole house and ski. Great deal sweetener.
Nice.
I rented out a townhouse on the Upper West Side during COVID, and within one day had 23 offers. And the 3 top deal sweeteners were, again, a Hamptons vacation house was offered. Professional landscaping of the townhouse's backyard was offered. The tenants noticed that the backyard was kind of overgrown and whatnot. And they said, look, like, I'm a professional landscape designer and I have a team and we could redo this entire backyard for you for free if you rent us the house for free for the year. And the other one was an actress from a well-known Broadway who offered backstage passes and tickets for the owners, for the family, if they rented them the house. So, these deal sweeteners, actually none of those deal sweeteners won.
Okay. Someone, the price.
Yeah, someone really blew it out of the water price-wise. But yeah, I think, look, deal sweeteners, they make it fun, but they're tough. If you don't have the Jackson Hole house to offer.
Did the Jackson Hole house buyer win that deal?
Yes.
That's amazing. There you go. Deal sweeteners. Yeah, if you have to have the capital in order to get what you want. You got to have the bullets.
Yeah, and the
creativity. You got to have the
ammo.
So I wouldn't say that's not really a worse trend. It's good if you're on the sell side, and it's good if you can offer it to get what you want. But so I like the positive spin you put on the worst trend.
Yeah, depends on which side of the table you're on.
It always depends. All right, Natalie, I took enough of your time. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Happy New Year's. Best wishes to you, your family, your loved ones for the new year. And for our listeners, I'll put Natalie's contact in our show notes. Our final guest, Andrew Jorges, my attorney, not my criminal attorney, but my real estate attorney on the Real Talk podcast. Final episode, final segment, and the final guest of 2021. Andrew and I have been working together for several years now. You can catch up with him in his original story on episode 11 on the Real Talk podcast. And we also catch up on the COVID real estate market from a legal standpoint on episode 50th. Andrew most recently worked for the largest litigation firm, Adam Lightman Bailey, real estate litigation firm, where he was in charge of closings there. And this year he spun off to create and found his own company, the Jorges Lawfirm. Andrew, how can people find you online?
They can find me at thejorgeslawfirm.com. You can Google me. I got a website, acj@jorgeslaw.com. It's all there.
Okay, and you can also follow him on Instagram, Jorges Lawfirm. Jorges with a J. You can also find him on Instagram, Andrew Jorges as well. No numbers, no spaces, no underscore. Andrew, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you for having me back. Doing
good to be back, huh?
Happy Thursday. Good to be back.
Happy Thursday. Happy New Year's Eve.
Almost there. Almost into 2022.
That's right. So let's jump right into it. please give me your 2021 biggest winner in real estate.
So 2021 biggest winner in real estate, I think, it was the pandemic buyer in New York City. People taking on early risk in the pandemic. Look, the stats are starting to form themselves and show that Q2 2020, the Manhattan apartment sales fell 54%. It was the largest decline in 30 years. The median sale price fell 18% to 1 million. It was the biggest decline in a decade. There were only, at that time, about 1,100 sales in Q2 2020. The lowest numbers on record. We were looking at that time, I'm sure you remember this, we were looking into the real estate abyss. And savvy buyers at that time saw the shutdown between April and July of 2020. They saw it as an opportunity to find a great bargain during a period of historically low interest rates. So that were buyers who were already in contract, tried to negotiate price reductions, many successfully did. And then just buyers who were on the sideline who saw that June, July, August, September, October period to take advantage and find a bargain. And listen, and now that bet is paying out, and you see these buyers holding assets that are rapidly appreciating. I've had clients who bought in that period. They've done cash out refis. They flipped the property for substantial profits, or they're just holding it. And they have a great asset. So the pandemic buyer that took a bet in 2022 proved to be a winner in 2021 and into the future. And I think that's going to be especially true as the Fed starts to ease up and increase interest rates. You're going to see that bet make only more sense. So the pandemic buyer in New York City, I think, was a winner in 2021.
100%, I can agree with you. Okay, what about the biggest loser in real estate?
The biggest loser that we're seeing right now are office landlords. 18% of office space in New York City is vacant. That's the highest rate in more than 30 years, according to a report released recently by the state controller. Office rents are down 4%. Unemployment as of October was about 11%. It's 4 times the financial crisis. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, I think. Swipe rates in building management systems dropped about 95% in April 2020. And they've only clawed back about 30% of it. So people are finding their footing in working from home. And it's almost certain that as we move forward, that a lot of these office leases are going to come to expire. There's going to be a glut of inventory. So landlords in the city need to think about how do they repurpose these spaces. And something that people are talking about are converting the vacant office spaces into residential use. I don't know, stay tuned, but certainly the biggest office landlords are taking the biggest hit at the moment.
I cannot agree with you more even on that as well. Our previous guest also noted the same. The silver lining, this leads into our next segment, the biggest winner in business. I'm going to parlay that. And the biggest silver lining during the pandemic is the flight to quality that we have seen in the office market. So Class A buildings like 425 Park, but the biggest building and the one with the most eyeballs and the one that you have also seen yourself, you've walked by definitely, is One Vanderbilt. One Vanderbilt is built by developer SL Green. They're almost fully leased out, and on a per square foot basis, they are the highest in New York City. So if you think about, okay, you're a company that wants to spend X amount of dollars on rent per year, the office spaces are obviously being used at a significantly reduced capacity. Well, then here comes these companies that are going into SL Green's One Vanderbilt, paying $200 and almost $300 a square foot. The only 2 units I believe that are still on the market right now is the Penthouse. Their asking price is at $322 a foot. The Penthouse floor has about 10,000 square feet of availability. So you put that into math, that's $3.2 million in annual rent, monthly rent of $266,000. And that doesn't even include any escalation. One Vanderbilt seems to be the one unique property that has positioned itself in a niche market of where quality companies with money, still has money, will always go to the top buildings.
Yeah, great location, beautiful building. My wife just took me there for my birthday a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so the roof up there.
We ended up, the line was too long. We ended up not going up, but we had dinner. I guess on the mezzanine level, they have a beautiful restaurant there. Great building. And definitely, I think, a bright spot in all that's going on with the office space culture. I agree.
Who's your biggest winner in business 2021?
Yeah, nobody in particular in terms of a particular business, but I think companies that were able to adapt to the remote virtual model, and look at kind of how it's breaking down. A survey conducted by the partnership of New York City surveyed 188 employers in October of 2021. 8% of office workers are back in the office full time. 54% are fully remote, and nearly 40 are hybrid. So the businesses in our industry, right? The property managers, the institutional lenders, the law firms, the brokerages, who you and I deal with on a daily basis.
Commercial leasing brokers, retail leasing
commercial
brokers.
All of the above. So many of them were able to adapt with remote closings, meetings, cloud-based operating systems, right?
Yeah.
That they leaned into the virtual business operations. They've had a much easier time during the pandemic if they were open-minded about it. But there's a lot of businesses that didn't do that, right? And you and I are dealing with a number of property managers right now that are not committing to a remote virtual environment. So what did we see in December of 2021? We saw a lot of closings get punted into 2022 because they didn't have the bandwidth to deal with these closings virtually, remotely. They wanted to kind of still do it the old school way. You come in, we're going to sit elbow to elbow. We're going to have closings, wear a mask. We're only going to have people that we need to have. The management companies who adapted don't have those issues. So you and I have a couple of closings that we would have loved to have closed the first week in December. They're not closing until December sometimes. And the clients are saying, well, why is this happening? It's because some of these resistant companies are not kind of playing by the new rules. So the biggest winners, I think, those companies, those businesses that are saying remote is here, virtual is here, let's lean into it, let's try and perfect it. They're the ones who you're seeing kind of taking advantage of the field. So winners of 2021 adaptable companies.
Definitely a shout out to the managing agents that have adapted to the virtual model. Huge round of applause to them. And shame on the many managing agents that we work with who shall remain nameless that have made our lives and our share and the sellers' lives and even the buyers as well just quite difficult. I don't want to say miserable, but definitely difficult for not adapting and not adjusting to the current conditions that we're in.
Yeah, and listen, they're not only just property managers, like the couple that I think you're referring to are law firms that act as transfer agent for certain buildings, and it's like the law firm is stuck in its way, right? And it's unfortunate. Like I look at how I practice my business. You got to be light on your feet. You got to be adaptable. I'm completely remote. I have an office, but I can work from anywhere. There's pros and cons to that, but for me, in terms of conducting my business, it's invaluable. Like that I have a cloud-based system. I can open up a computer anywhere. I could do a closing if I'm on the West Coast. I mean, I'm in New York 99.9% of the time. But if wherever you go, you could do work. I mean, that model is going to people have to figure out operations and systems that help with that.
That's right. Got to be nimble on your feet in business. What is your biggest real estate surprise in 2021?
Biggest real estate surprise 2021 is the comeback. Takk, you remember New York was dead. It was dead. People were writing about it.
It was rough.
April 2020 to June 2020, the industry was literally in a lockdown. Everybody in the New York City real estate industry, we thought we'd never be back to business. And, everyone was considering finding new work in a different field. But 18 months later, the real estate market's back, and it's back with a vengeance. By July, more people were moving back to New York City than were exiting, which for a long time was catching headlines in the other way.
That's right.
And the numbers confirm that value's coming back. Anybody in the industry knows competition is super tight and sellers have leverage again. It went away and now it's back overnight. And Q3 2021, more apartments were sold in Manhattan than in any other time in the last 32 years. Let me repeat that. Yep. More apartments sold Q3 2021 than any other time in the last 32 years. That's 3 times as many sales in the same period from the prior year. 76% more than the same time in 2019 before the pandemic. The sales volume for the period topped 9.2 $8.5 billion. So people want to be back, and the money's following it. And so how quickly we've come back, I thought it would have taken years and years and years, but the market is humming. Knock on wood for everybody who's in the industry, and it's coming back.
2008 financial crisis was the worrisome event of financial wherewithal. Last year's crisis was your life and it was your health. Trying to compare the two crashes, or the two real estate crashes between those 2 years, is very, very difficult. Best new trend in real estate.
So the best new trend in real estate I've found is the sight unseen virtual buyer. Before the pandemic, I could think on one hand, a buyer who says, hey, I'm from California, I'm putting in an offer that was accepted, and I'm buying an apartment I've never seen. I haven't been in New York in years, but I'm buying. I mean, I can think of maybe on one hand how many times that happened in my career. Since the pandemic has started, I'm seeing it more and more. Like, it's a fairly common thing where somebody will view an apartment online through a broker virtually, remotely. There's 3D floor plan imaging that I know Compass utilizes. StreetEasy has a platform for that, and how comfortable they can get with buying an apartment never having seen it. Now, I would have thought also that you'd have then also a buyer who buys based on these 3D imaging, and then they have buyer's remorse after they close and see the place. And I haven't had that. Haven't had it. It hasn't happened. And that is a risk, obviously, when you don't touch something and feel something, you just buy it off the internet. But it's worked very well, and that I think it's going to be moving in that direction as new variants come out and people can't travel as much, but they still want to be in the market. They're going to do that, and I think it's a cool thing to be into.
That's right. I think the rise of Airbnb and VRBO also helps with people making decisions just on a virtual basis. Obviously, the financial scale is completely different, but it does give reps to the consumer on, hey, this is what the virtual tour looks like on Airbnb, and you're going to stay here for a week. This is what you're getting, and you can't really back out. I think that's definitely a psychological help in push to getting these buyers to also buy offline, buy just through a floor plan and also imaging and through virtual tours. Okay, biggest business surprise. So we did real estate surprise. Do you have a business surprise?
Yeah. So, and I'll say it's a pleasant surprise. Despite the doom and gloom that we were talking about, the effect of the pandemic, the pandemic's effect on office space. Nice to see that in September, Google announced that they're paying $2.1 billion for an office building in New York City. It's the most expensive sale of a single office building in the U.S. since the pandemic began. Right. So, and that they also noted that they're hiring an additional 2,000 or so employees in the next few years. So, despite the fact that there's unease and concern about the office culture, Google is doubling down on their footprint. I love it. I think it's a pleasant surprise.
That's great. Yeah, it definitely shows the health and confidence of what's to come in the future. And with the 2,000 new hires, that's also going to help not just the residential real estate sector, but that should help the lagging numbers that we're seeing in the MTA.
There's a whole ecosystem. Yeah, there's a whole ecosystem that comes with that.
That's right. That's right. And then last but not least, the worst trend in real estate in 2021.
Yeah, the worst trend in 2021. I think what I'm not a fan of seeing, the philosophy that just hitting the pause button on financial obligations, for example, rent, is a long-term solution to the pandemic. I understand and appreciate the protections and safety nets that needed to come in at the very beginning of the pandemic, and we've been still dealing with. We're 2 years in. We're about to start year 3. And you're still seeing a backlog in the court system, moratoriums on evictions that are, should be expiring in this upcoming month. But the just general philosophy of don't pay, we'll figure it out down the road. I think we have to be smarter than that. I think as the city, the government, there has to be a solution to these hard problems. How we help out restaurants, how we help tenants and landlords. I mean, landlords just not getting paid rent. They've got to pay water, they got to pay utilities, they got to pay electricity and property taxes and upkeep. And so That's something that I think we need to be more mindful of going forward.
Right. There is no moratorium on real estate tax. There is no moratorium on the heat and the water bill. So while we understand, we want to be compassionate of those that truly cannot work. There also has to be a balance that the city should think about on the other side, where real estate is, at the end of the day, is not a charity. It is someone's savings account too, or it's somebody's, it puts table on families. It puts food on the table for certain families, and not every real estate landlord is a wealthy landlord. They may also have a mortgage. They also have financial obligations, other financial obligations. So that's definitely an interesting trend that you point out. It is a bad trend. It's a little bit different when there is a moratorium on, I think, student loans, which the debt is backed by the government, right? It's Sallie Mae. So can the government hold off on another 6 months on student loans for those students that cannot pay? Well, sure, because it's not like the government is also obligated to pay another third party by holding on to that debt. So it's an interesting concept that I think should be really revisited. Maybe by a new administration. Maybe Eric Adams is somebody that will come in and step up and maybe potentially help a little bit of the those New York City landlords that are struggling. Quick thing, what did you learn in 2021?
What did I learn? Probably. What I learned in 2021, very rarely do you see the same issue twice in the exact same way, right? A lot of the issues and difficulties that I faced early on in my career helped me get through the pandemic. So if I could just kind of as general advice is learn from mistakes that you make early on, or things that you learn, issues that you work through, because they're going to help you in the future. So any issues that you're learning during this pandemic, there's going to be another pandemic, maybe not in the same way, but you're going to have to use that in order to get by in the future, I think. Whatever the pandemic of the future will be, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, a lot of the lessons we're learning today are going to be used then.
And now, as a business owner yourself, as a CEO, what's one thing that you've learned as a business owner? 2021, first time business owner.
When you own your own practice, it's like it's always on you. There's nobody else say, hey, listen, this is the problem that we're experiencing. You've got to figure it out, or another department figures it out. When you work for yourself, it's on you. You've got to dig yourself out of any issue. You've got to work out problems. You've got to find solutions for your clients. Because at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. We're trying to provide the best client services we can for our clients. It falls entirely on you. And it's incredibly rewarding when you get a client who at the end of the day looks at you and says, thank you so much. You helped me out of this problem, this dispute, this real estate transaction that was quirky. It's great. It's all on you.
Yeah. What's one advice you can give to other attorneys that may look to start their own practice?
Do as much. You can never be, I've had this question before. I would say you can never be over prepared. When I went on my own, I did a lot of research and digging, and as much as I did, you could always still do more. So if you're going to go on your own, do as much homework as you possibly can. You can never be over prepared. You can always have better forms. You can always have a better file management system. You can always have better relationships with vendors. You can always have more templates. Just be as prepared as you can. So when the time comes, you hit the ground running.
And it's still not enough.
Not enough.
It's the nature of the business. Will you be hiring in 2022?
I hope so.
Okay.
If the market continues the way it's going, I hope so. Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of labor shortage. There's not a lot of the market's so hot that there's not a huge inventory of people, candidates.
Well, what do you think about the graduating class of 2022? Those lawyers that are coming out of Brooklyn Law or New York Law or the Columbia Law, the local new human capital that's coming out in New York City. Maybe someone that's listening on this to this episode may hopefully reach out to you and ask you some questions. Maybe sit down for a coffee. Who knows?
My advice to them would be buckle up.
Andrew, thank you very much. Happy New Year. We will certainly be doing dozens of other deals next year, and hopefully this next year will be as strong as what we had this year.
I appreciate you. I appreciate Team Yamaguchi. I appreciate all the deals we do, the relationship, and I can't wait for 2022. Let's do it. Keep chopping wood.
All right. Keep chopping wood. Thank you, Andrew. Talk to you soon.
You got it.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.